Welcome to Family Stories Collection. If you enjoy powerful tales of revenge, betrayal, and justice served cold, make sure you follow this channel so you never miss the next story. Now, let us begin. They called it an accident, a tragic misstep, a young woman full of life and promise gone too soon. At the funeral, people whispered with pity, their eyes heavy with sorrow. But as they placed flowers on her grave, they didn't notice the mother's face. Dressed in black, she stood quietly, her hands folded, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Not the smile of madness, not the smile of denial, but the smile of someone who already knew the truth and who already had a plan. Her daughter's death was no accident. She could see it in the hollow eyes of the man who dared to call himself innocent. She could hear it in the sharp tone of his voice, rushing to close the matter, rushing to silence the questions. And she could feel it in her bones, the way only a mother knows when something is deeply, terribly wrong. She did not scream. She did not curse the heavens. She did not collapse in despair like they expected her to. No, she remained silent. Because silence is sharper than rage. Silence is the mask of patience. And patience is the weapon of revenge. In that silence, she began her work. Piece by piece, detail by detail, she gathered what others overlooked. A misplaced receipt, a nervous glance, a careless word spoken at the wrong time. And most importantly, an old letter. A letter her daughter had written hidden away, never meant to be found so soon. A letter that held the truth and the power to destroy the man who had destroyed her life. This is not the story of grief that withers in the dark. This is the story of a mother who turned her grief into a quiet storm. A storm no one saw coming until it was too late. Stay with me, because what follows is a tale of betrayal of justice and of how a mother's silence became the loudest scream of all. She was her mother's whole world, a daughter born not of wealth or privilege, but of sacrifice and endless devotion. Her name was Clara, a gentle soul with a quiet smile, eyes that sparkled with dreams, and a heart that believed in kindness, even when the world offered cruelty. From the time she was small, her mother devoted every breath, every coin, every ounce of strength to giving Clara a chance at life beyond struggle. She worked 2 jobs, long hours on tired feet, never once complaining, because every book Clara read, every step she took toward her future, was worth it. When Clara was accepted into university, her mother wept, not tears of sorrow, but tears of pride. And when Clara graduated with honors, the mother stood taller than she ever had, though her hands were calloused, her back bent from years of labor. Their bond was unbreakable. They had faced life as a team, mother and daughter against the world. Every late-night meal, every whispered conversation about dreams and fears, every sacrifice unspoken, yet deeply felt, it wove them together in a tapestry of love that no knife should have been able to cut. But someone had found a way. He entered Clara's life like a shadow disguised in sunlight. His name was Daniel. At first glance, he was everything a young woman might hope for: confident, ambitious, charming. In that way powerful men often are. He spoke with assurance, promised security, painted pictures of a glittering future. But beneath that polish was something colder. A hunger, not for love, but for control. A thirst, not for companionship, but for possession. The mother had seen it. She always saw what others tried to hide. The way his hand lingered too tightly on Clara's arm. The way his smile never reached his eyes. The way his questions about her daughter's job, her income, her inheritance were disguised as casual conversation, but carried the weight of calculation. Clara defended him, of course. "You're just being protective, Mama," she would say, brushing off her mother's concerns. "He believes in me. He wants what's best for me. He makes me feel safe." Safe. The word cut like glass, because the mother knew sometimes the ones who promise safety are the very ones who bring danger. Then came the accident. That is what the world was told. That is what the newspapers printed. A late-night drive, a sudden skid, a fatal crash on the highway. Clara gone at just 24. The official report called it tragic. The whispers at the funeral called it fate. But the mother's heart called it something else entirely, because the details didn't add up. Clara never drove late at night without telling her mother first. She never drank, never lost control. The car, her beloved car, had been serviced just weeks before. And Daniel, the devoted boyfriend, emerged without a scratch. Too shaken to speak, they said. Too traumatized to remember. But in the photographs from that night, the mother saw his face. Not grief-stricken, not broken, but cold, almost calculating, as though a plan had unfolded exactly as intended. At the funeral, the mourners wept. Friends clung to one another. Relatives shook their heads in disbelief. And the mother? She stood still, her hands folded, her eyes empty, her lips pressed into silence. She did not cry, not there, not where he could see, because she knew her daughter's story was not finished. And she knew Daniel's role in that story was far darker than he allowed the world to believe. From that moment on, her silence was not grief. It was preparation. The world thought she was broken. Daniel thought he had won. But the mother knew better. For every plan he had made, she would make one sharper. For every lie he had told, she would find the truth. And for every ounce of pain he had caused, she would deliver it back to him, quietly, patiently, until he shattered beneath the weight of his own sins. The world thought the mother was broken. They saw her silence as weakness. They mistook her stillness for surrender. But in truth, she was listening, watching, waiting. When mourners left and the flowers wilted, the house grew quiet, too quiet. Her daughter's laughter no longer filled the rooms. Her voice no longer echoed through the kitchen. Every corner of the house carried memories sharp enough to cut flesh. But the mother did not collapse into despair. She carried her grief like armor, because she knew the battle was only beginning. She started with the small things, details everyone else overlooked. The car's maintenance report, the receipts from the gas station, the timeline of that night. She read them again and again, searching not for what was there, but for what was missing. Daniel's story shifted with every retelling. At first, he claimed Clara wanted to drive. Later, he said she insisted. Sometimes he remembered music playing in the car. Other times, silence. The inconsistencies piled up like bricks in a wall of lies. The mother kept her face blank whenever Daniel visited, bringing flowers, offering hollow condolences. Neighbors praised his devotion. Such a strong young man, they whispered. So loyal, so heartbroken. But when his eyes met hers, she saw no sorrow, only calculation, only fear of being discovered. Late at night, she sat at Clara's desk, sifting through her daughter's journals, pages filled with dreams, sketches, to-do lists, and sometimes small fragments of doubt. He got angry today when I was late. He wants me to quit my job, says he can take care of me. He says I don't need my friends anymore, that I should focus on us. Each line was a dagger. Each word a glimpse into a prison Clara had never fully escaped. And the mother's resolve hardened. She would not let Clara's story end as a headline. She would not let Daniel rewrite her daughter's life as if it were his to claim. That was when she visited Robert, the family's attorney, a man her late husband had trusted, the same man who had helped them buy their modest home, who had drawn up wills and handled contracts. Robert was older now, his hair thinned, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. When she sat in his office, she did not weep. She simply placed the accident report on his desk and said, "Tell me what doesn't fit." Robert read silently, his brow furrowed. Finally, he closed the folder. "Too clean," he murmured. "An accident always leaves loose threads. But this feels written." He leaned forward. "You need proof, not suspicion, proof that ties him to this. Until then, the world will believe him." The mother nodded. Proof. She would find it. Weeks passed. Daniel returned to his life of wealth and appearances. He attended galas, smiled for cameras, spoke of Clara with rehearsed sorrow. But the mother was always nearby. She walked where he walked, listened where he spoke, blended into the background like a shadow he could not shake. And then she found it. Buried in Clara's dresser beneath folded scarves was a small bundle tied with ribbon. Inside letters, some written by Clara, some sent to her. At first they seemed ordinary. Notes between friends, scraps of poetry. But one envelope bore Daniel's handwriting. Its words were careful, deliberate. Once this is behind us, the estate will finally be ours. No more debts, no more waiting. Trust me, Clara. I know what I'm doing. The mother's breath caught. Ours. He had written ours. But it was clear whose name he meant to erase from that promise. The letters became her weapon, not to be wielded recklessly, but to be sharpened with patience. She copied them, hid the originals, and built her case, piece by piece. Every night she sat by the window, with a candle burning low, whispering to her daughter, as if she were still there. Your words will save you, my love, and they will condemn him. Her silence was no longer grief. It was a blade she was sharpening in the dark. The world saw a grieving mother too broken to fight. But Daniel would soon learn the truth. She was not broken. She was waiting, and when the time came, her revenge would not roar like thunder. It would strike quietly, like the whisper of a knife in the dark. The first step in any game of revenge is to make your enemy believe there is no game at all. That was the mother's greatest advantage. Daniel thought she was broken. He thought her silence meant defeat. So she decided to feed his illusion, to wear her grief like a mask, and let him underestimate her every move. She began with Robert, the lawyer, who had once guided her husband through endless contracts. When she entered his office this time, her posture was bent, her voice soft. I don't know what to do, Robert, she whispered. He's everywhere. He visits. He offers help. But I feel trapped. Robert studied her carefully, reading between the lines. You're not trapped, he said finally. You're setting the stage. I can see it. She didn't deny it, but she didn't confirm it either. Instead, she placed the letter Daniel had written on his desk. Not the original, only a copy. The real one was hidden sealed, untouchable. Robert's eyes narrowed. This is more than suspicion. It's intent. But if we move too soon, he'll bury everything. I know, she said softly. That's why we wait. That's why we watch. And when he thinks he's safe, we strike. Next came Clara's closest friend, Emily, a young woman with fiery eyes, the kind who never stopped asking questions. The mother invited her for tea, speaking in hushed tones, as if the walls themselves could betray her. Emily, did Clara ever say anything to you? Anything about Daniel? Emily's hand trembled slightly around her cup. She told me she felt smothered, that he was controlling. But she loved him, or thought she did. Why? What are you thinking? The mother seemed closer, her expression tired, broken. I think Daniel knows more about that night than he admits. But if I accuse him, everyone will think I'm just a grieving mother clinging to shadows. Emily's jaw tightened. Then let me help. I still have her old messages, her texts. They might mean something. The mother placed her hand gently over Emily's. Not yet, dear. Not yet. For now, you keep quiet. Pretend nothing is wrong. Can you do that? Emily hesitated, then nodded. I can. Another ally secured. Another piece placed on the board. But the most important step was making Daniel believe she was harmless. She invited him to dinner one evening. The table was set simply soup, bread, a bottle of wine left from better days. When he arrived, he wore that same polished smile, the one that fooled everyone else. But not her. Never her. Daniel, she said softly, almost trembling, thank you for being here. It's been so hard without Clara. I don't know what I'd do without you checking in. His shoulders relaxed. Of course, he believed her. A weak woman clinging to the last remnant of her daughter's life. They ate in silence for a time until she let the words slip like an accident. I found one of Clara's old letters, she murmured. Funny the things she kept. She wrote about the future, about the estate, about debts. Her eyes flicked upward just in time to see it, that sharp, almost invisible flinch across his face. A tightening of the jaw, a flicker of panic before the mask returned. Oh, he laughed lightly. Clara always worried too much. She never really understood money. I tried to take care of it for her. She lowered her gaze, feigning embarrassment. Of course you're right. I must be reading too much into things. I'm just lost without her. Inside she smiled. Because she had seen it. The first crack in his armor. Over the next weeks, she planted more of these small traps. A casual mention of Clara's journals, a passing comment about insurance policies, a quiet suggestion that she might ask the police to reopen the case. Each time Daniel's response was calm, rehearsed, perfectly smooth. But his eyes betrayed him. A flash of irritation, a shadow of fear, a quick change of subject. She collected each reaction like pearls on a string. Proof not yet visible to the world, but undeniable to her. One afternoon, she visited the old garden where Clara used to paint. Daniel found her there, kneeling among the flowers, staring at the canvas Clara had left unfinished. "You really should move on," he said gently. "Dwelling on the past won't bring her back." The mother turned, slowly, her face pale, her eyes hollow. "You're right," she whispered. "It won't bring her back. But sometimes, the past refuses to stay buried." For the briefest moment, his confidence faltered. He stepped back just slightly, and she knew he felt it, the unease of being watched, the terror of secrets too fragile to remain hidden. The town still pitied her. Neighbors brought casseroles, offered prayers. They saw only a grieving woman, quiet and fading. But Daniel began to wonder. At night, lying in his luxury apartment, he replayed their conversations. Did she know more than she let on? Was she truly broken? Or was she waiting? The unease gnawed at him like a worm in the dark. And that was exactly what she wanted. Because the first stage of revenge is not the blow. It is the silence before the storm. The whisper that unsettles. The doubt that corrodes. Until your enemy is no longer sure where the danger lies, or when it will strike. And so the mother waited, her traps laid, her mask flawless, her silence sharpened into a blade. Daniel thought he was safe, but he had already stepped into her web. And soon every lie he ever told would become the rope around his own neck. The house was quiet that evening, the kind of silence that pressed against the walls and settled heavy in the chest. The mother moved slowly through Clara's old room, touching objects as though they might vanish if her fingers lingered too long. The bed was still made, though the sheets had faded. The window still framed the oak tree Clara loved to sit beneath. On the desk sat a stack of sketchbooks, their pages filled with bright colors that now seemed ghostly. The mother sat down, her hands trembling, as she opened a drawer she hadn't touched in months. Beneath layers of paper receipts and forgotten pens, she found an envelope yellowed at the edges. Her name was written across the front in her daughter's handwriting, hurried but familiar. She froze. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Then she opened it. The words inside were uneven. Some lines smudged as if written in tears. "Mom, if you ever find this, it means I couldn't tell you in person. I've been scared for weeks. Daniel isn't who he says he is. He watches me constantly. He checks my phone, my emails, even my bank account. He says it's because he loves me, but I don't feel safe anymore. He talks about money all the time, about how we'll inherit, how everything will change once he controls it. I've tried to convince myself I'm imagining things, but I can't ignore it anymore. Sometimes when he looks at me, it's like he doesn't see me at all, only what I represent. I'm planning to leave. I don't know how, but I can't stay. If anything happens to me, promise me you won't believe it was an accident. Promise me you'll look deeper." The mother's vision blurred as she read the words, shaking in her hands. A chill ran through her body. Clara had known. Her daughter had felt the shadow closing in, had feared the very man who now paraded himself as her grieving companion. This was not paranoia. This was not a mother inventing villains out of sorrow. Clara herself had left the truth behind, hidden in ink, waiting to be found. The mother placed the letter flat on the desk, staring at every curve of her daughter's script. The phrases struck her like hammer blows: inherit, control. Not an accident. Each one connected to the cracks she had seen in Daniel's mask, to the uneasy flinches, to the sudden bursts of irritation. The pieces began to fit together. Clara had planned to escape, and Daniel must have known. The accident that stole her life was no accident at all. It was the consequence of a plan, a silencing, before she could walk away. She folded the letter carefully, almost reverently, and tucked it back into the envelope. This was no longer just a memory. It was evidence, the first solid link between suspicion and truth. She thought of Robert the lawyer and Emily, Clara's best friend. They needed to see this, but not yet. Timing mattered. If she moved too soon, Daniel would bury every trace, just as Robert had warned. Instead, she placed the letter into the hidden compartment of the old jewelry box that had belonged to her grandmother. No one but she knew about it. She pressed the lid shut and whispered, "Thank you, Clara. I hear you." The next day, she tested Daniel. She invited him for tea again, her voice deliberately fragile. "I was cleaning Clara's room," she murmured. Eyes cast down, and I came across some of her things. She always was so dramatic, wasn't she? Writing notes, keeping little secrets. Daniel stiffened just slightly. "What kind of secrets?" She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Oh, nothing important. Just silly thoughts about leaving, about being scared. You know how young women are. Always making mountains out of molehills." His expression relaxed again, but not completely. His hand tightened around his cup, his knuckles pale. "Yes," he said slowly. "She could be dramatic." The mother nodded gently, pretending to agree, but inside, she was screaming. That flicker of fear, that careful pause, told her everything. He knew exactly what Clara had written, and that meant he knew she had been planning to leave him. Over the following nights, she reread the letter in secret. Each time, new meanings revealed themselves. Clara had not only described her fear, she had recorded patterns, Daniel checking her bank accounts, his obsession with inheritance, his veiled threats. These were details only Clara could have known, and they matched too perfectly with what the mother herself had witnessed: the sudden disappearance of certain documents, the unexplained charges, the way Daniel's tone shifted whenever money was discussed. The letter became a map leading directly to the truth Daniel had tried to bury. Her grief no longer felt like emptiness. It was fuel. It burned steady and quiet, guiding her patience. She began preparing the next step. She gathered copies of Clara's financial records, printing statements from her daughter's old accounts. She asked Emily for the text messages Clara had sent in those final weeks. The messages echoed the letter, almost word for word. "He doesn't let me breathe. He talks about the estate like it's already his. I need to get away." Each piece was another brick in the foundation. She was building a fortress of evidence that no lawyer could dismiss. And still she kept her mask. To Daniel, she was fragile, dependent, grateful for his visits. She let him believe he was winning, that she was folding into the role of a weak, lonely widow. But behind her eyes, the storm was gathering. Because now she knew. Clara had spoken. Clara had left her warning, and the mother would honor it not with tears, but with precision. One evening, she stood at the window of her bedroom, the letter in her hand. The street outside was quiet, the air heavy with summer heat. She whispered into the dark, "It wasn't an accident. I promise you, Clara, it will never be called that again." Her reflection in the glass looked older, wearier, but there was steel in her gaze. For months she had been surviving. Now she was preparing to fight. And Daniel, in his arrogance, had no idea that the very words he thought were buried would soon rise against him. The old letter was more than paper and ink. It was a voice carried beyond the grave, a thread of truth that refused to be silenced. It was the heart of her daughter, still protecting her, still guiding her, even in death. And it was the weapon she would use to tear Daniel's world apart, piece by piece, until nothing remained of his lies. The first time she revealed a piece of the truth, it was almost casual. At the weekly church gathering in the same hall where neighbors whispered condolences. Only weeks earlier, the mother stood with her teacup balanced in her hand and said, her voice low but steady, "Clara was afraid, you know. She told me once. She wrote it down." The conversation around her stilled. A few women exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel, standing at the far end of the room, froze mid-laugh. For the first time since Clara's death, the mask slipped. His smile faltered just for a second before returning too quickly. But she had seen it. Others had seen it. A seed of doubt had been planted. Later that night, Daniel appeared at her door. He didn't knock gently. His fist slammed against the wood like a hammer. "We need to talk," he barked when she opened it. His eyes, usually polished and charming, were sharp and dangerous now. "You've been saying things," he continued, stepping inside uninvited. "Dangerous things. Clara's gone. It was an accident. Everyone knows that. But if you keep spreading lies, people will start asking questions. Questions that won't end well for you." The mother looked at him calmly, though her heart pounded. "Why would questions not end well? Daniel, unless you have something to hide." His jaw tightened. For a moment, the charming veneer was gone, and she saw the man Clara had feared, the man who controlled. Who demanded who? Silenced. "You're grieving," he said finally, his voice low and threatening. "People understand that. But if you keep dragging my name into this, I'll make sure you regret it. I have friends, power, money, and you—" He glanced around her modest living room, sneering. "You have nothing but a ghost in your paranoia." When he left, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled, she sat in the silence and let her fear settle. For a moment, his words had pierced her armor. Was she truly mad, clinging to shadows? Was grief twisting her mind, turning coincidence into conspiracy? The next day, the doubt spread. A neighbor she'd trusted pulled her aside and whispered, "Be careful. People are saying you're letting grief poison you. Clara's death was tragic, but you can't let it consume you." Even her sister called on the phone, her voice hesitant. "Are you sure, Margaret? Are you sure you're not imagining things? You've been alone with your thoughts for so long." The mother listened silent. Her fingers wrapped around the old letter hidden in her pocket. Doubts pressed against her like waves, but the paper in her hand was an anchor. She wasn't imagining this. Clara's words were real. Clara's fear was real. And Daniel's threats only confirmed it. Still, the pressure grew. Daniel was clever. He donated money to the church. He bought drinks for his colleagues. He smiled for photographs at charity dinners, his arm draped around influential men who called him a fine young fellow. The more he shone in public, the more her quiet warnings sounded like hysteria. She felt isolated, her voice small against the wall of his wealth and charm. One evening, her lawyer, Robert, invited her to his office. He spread out the document she had brought. There's the letter, the bank records, Clara's text messages. "It's compelling," he admitted, adjusting his glasses. "But it's not enough. Right now, it looks like grief. A mother grasping for answers. We need something concrete, a link that cannot be dismissed." Her hands trembled. "And if we don't find it," Robert looked at her, his expression grave, "then he wins. And you must ask yourself, Margaret, are you fighting for truth or for revenge?" The question haunted her. That night she sat by the window with the letter on her lap. Clara's voice seemed to whisper from the page. "Promise me you won't believe it was an accident. Promise me you'll look deeper." Her heart ached. What if looking deeper destroyed her? What if she chased shadows until she became a ghost herself? For hours, she wrestled with the thought. Her mind screamed for rest, for release, for the peace of letting go. But her soul burned with her daughter's final plea. The next week, Daniel struck back harder. A rumor spread that she was unstable, that she had been mixing pills with wine, that grief had driven her into delusion. Old friends began to avoid her eyes. The pastor called gently, suggesting she seek counseling. Even her employer quietly reduced her hours. Daniel's fingerprints were on all of it, but no one dared name him. And yet the more he tried to erase her, the more determined she became. She realized that this was his pattern. He isolated Clara in life, made her doubt her own perceptions, silenced her until she felt trapped. Now he was trying to do the same to her. But she was not Clara. She was older, wiser, and she had nothing left to lose. One evening, she deliberately confronted him in public. At a dinner, hosted by one of his business partners, she approached the table where Daniel sat, laughing, a glass of wine in hand. The room hushed as she placed the letter's envelope on the white tablecloth. Clara's words she said softly from her hand to mine. She feared you, Daniel, and now the world will know why. Daniel's face drained of color before hardening again. He grabbed the envelope and shoved it into his pocket, forcing a laugh. You see, she's sick, obsessed, making up stories. Forgive her, she doesn't know what she's saying. The guest murmured uneasily, torn between his charm and her steady eyes. She didn't argue. She simply turned and walked out, leaving the weight of her words to hang in the air. That night, Daniel stormed to her home once more angrier than before. If you ever show that letter again, he hissed, standing over her, you'll regret it. I'll bury you like I buried. He stopped himself, but it was too late. His words hung in the air, unfinished, incriminating. She didn't flinch. She looked up at him with calm, steady eyes. Like you buried Clara, she asked. He froze, then snarled and stormed out, slamming the door. In that silence, she knew the battle had turned. He was rattled, his mask was cracking, and though the world doubted her, though whispers swirled and isolation pressed in, she had touched the nerve. She had made him afraid. Still the question tormented her. Was she pursuing justice or vengeance? Could she separate the two? Or was she becoming as consumed as the man she sought to destroy? She didn't yet know the answer, but she knew one thing with certainty. She had promised Clara, and promises once made were not meant to be broken. The day of reckoning did not come with thunder or fire. It came with silence, a silence so heavy that even Daniel could not laugh his way through it. The courthouse was crowded, every wooden bench filled with neighbors, colleagues, and distant acquaintances who once praised him for his charm and success. They were all here now, not for admiration, but for curiosity, for the spectacle of watching a powerful man answer questions he could not control. At the front sat the judge, an older woman, with a gaze sharp enough to slice through lies. On one side, Daniel lounged in his seat, trying to look relaxed. His suit was tailored, his smile still practiced. Yet when his lawyer leaned in to whisper, his fingers tapped nervously against the table. On the other side, the mother sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, a small leather folder resting beside her. She did not shift. She did not fidget. She only waited. When the judge called the session to order, Daniel's attorney began with the same performance they had rehearsed for weeks. My client, he said smoothly, is a respected man in this community. He has suffered deeply from the tragic loss of his fiancée, Clara. It is cruel, frankly, that grief has twisted into false accusations. Mrs. Margaret Hall is understandably devastated by the loss of her daughter. But grief does not grant permission to invent villains where none exist. Daniel nodded along, his eyes sweeping the room as if daring anyone to disagree. Some did look uneasy, others skeptical, but the mother did not react. She waited until the judge turned to her lawyer. Mr. Robert, do you have evidence to support your client's claims? Robert stood steady and calm. Yes, Your Honor. We have documentation, witness testimony, and a written statement from Clara herself. The room shifted. Daniel's smirk faltered. A statement, he muttered. Robert lifted the folder and pulled out the letter carefully sealed in its original envelope. This was discovered among Clara's belongings after her death. Handwritten, dated, signed. It details her fear, her suspicion, and her intent to leave Mr. Daniel Whitmore due to controlling behavior and threats. It also mentions financial transfers she believed were fraudulent. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The judge extended her hand. Robert passed the letter forward. As the judge read silently, Daniel's lawyer shifted in his seat, clearly blindsided. Daniel tried to speak, but his lawyer gripped his arm, whispering harshly, "Don't. Not yet." When the judge finished, her face was unreadable. She placed the letter down. "Do you contest the authenticity?" she asked. Daniel's lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, anyone could have written this. A grieving mother could." At that moment, Robert raised another piece of evidence, a recording device. He pressed play. Daniel's own voice filled the courtroom, sharp, arrogant, undeniable. "If she keeps pushing me, I'll bury her like I buried." The recording cut there, but it was enough. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Daniel shot to his feet. "That's taken out of context," he shouted, his composure gone. That's not what I meant. The judge's gavel struck wood. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore. You will control yourself in this courtroom. His face flushed with sweat, collecting at his brow. His lawyer scrambled, flipping through papers as though they might produce a miracle. None came. Robert continued calmly. In addition, Your Honor, we have bank records showing transfers from Clara's accounts into holdings under Mr. Whitmore's name. Transfers that began shortly before her death. Transfers that match what Clara described in her letter. The evidence stacked like bricks around him, building a wall he could not climb. Witnesses were called Clara's best friend, who testified about late-night calls filled with fear. A coworker who admitted Clara had confided she was planning to leave Daniel. Even the mother herself took the stand. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She simply told the truth. How her daughter had changed in those final months. How her laughter had dimmed. How Daniel's shadow loomed over every corner of her life. Daniel grew more agitated with each word. He interrupted. He sneered. He shook his head violently. But the more he fought, the more obvious his desperation became. The mask of charm was gone. The man revealed was cruel, defensive, and cornered. When closing statements came, Robert did not give a fiery speech. He simply gestured to the letter lying on the judge's desk. These are Clara's own words. A daughter's voice silenced too soon, but preserved in ink. She feared him. She named him. And now, even in death, she asks us to listen. Silence followed. The judge looked at Daniel for a long moment, then back at the mother. Finally, she spoke. This court finds sufficient evidence to pursue charges of financial fraud coercion and suspicion of foul play regarding the death of Clara Hall. Pending further criminal investigation, Mr. Whitmore is to be remanded into custody. The gavel struck. The sound was final, absolute. Daniel exploded. No, you can't do this. I'm innocent. She's lying. His voice cracked shrill now, nothing like the confident man who once commanded rooms with a smile. Guards stepped forward, taking him by the arms. He thrashed, shouting curses, his eyes wild. He turned toward the mother. You think you've won? This isn't over. But the mother only sat, hands folded, lips curved into that same faint smile she had worn at the funeral. Calm, unshaken, almost serene. The crowd turned to look at her, whispers swirling. Some called her strong. Others called her cold. She did not care. She had promised her daughter. And today, that promise had been honored. As Daniel was dragged away, his face pale with rage, she rose from her seat. The judge's words still echoed sufficient evidence. It was not final justice yet, but it was the beginning. The world had seen him. The mask was gone forever. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones thrust forward. Mrs. Hall, how do you feel? Do you believe justice has been served? She paused, the summer light warm on her face. She thought of Clara, the child she had raised, the laughter that once filled their home, the dreams stolen too soon. She thought of Daniel's threats, his arrogance, his downfall. Then she answered softly, I feel peace, and I feel my daughter's voice is finally being heard. The cameras clicked. The reporter scribbled, but she didn't stay. She walked past them down the courthouse steps, her black dress moving gently in the wind. She did not need applause. She did not need sympathy. She had only needed truth. And now with quiet dignity, she had it. She did not weep. She did not rage. She smiled, because revenge, she realized, was never about shouting louder. It was about patience. It was about silence. It was about waiting until the ground beneath your enemy gave way until he fell by his own weight. That was her victory. That was her daughter's legacy. And she carried it with her like a flame as she disappeared into the crowd. I did not win a war. I did not take back what was stolen. My daughter is still gone, and no verdict, no evidence, no punishment will change that. But as I sit here tonight, in the quiet of our home, the same walls that once echoed with Clara's laughter, I know one thing with absolute certainty. I kept the truth alive for her. She will never be reduced to a statistic, a forgotten accident, or a tragic headline. She will be remembered as she was a young woman who dreamed, who loved, who trusted too much, and whose voice, even from the grave, was strong enough to unmask the man who thought he had silenced her forever. For months, people told me to let go. They whispered behind my back that grief had clouded my mind, that I was inventing monsters to avoid facing the randomness of tragedy. Even my closest friends begged me to stop digging, to stop questioning, to stop accusing. But deep inside, a mother's heart knows what the world cannot. We feel the difference between chance and choice, between fate and cruelty. My silence was never weakness. It was a blade sharpened with patience. Patience. That word has become my anchor. I used to think justice required fire and fury protests and shouts, demands, and fights. But no, justice requires patience, the kind that waits in the shadows, collecting every detail, watching every movement, setting the stage so carefully that when the truth emerges, it cannot be denied. Silence is stronger than screams, because silence makes the guilty nervous. Silence makes them wonder what you know, what you've seen, what you've kept hidden. And silence, when finally broken, becomes a thunder no one can ignore. I have thought often about Daniel, not because I miss him, not because I pity him, but because he serves as a reminder of what unchecked greed and arrogance can do. He believed he could control everyone, Clara, me, even the system. He wore his charm like armor, and he thought it made him untouchable. But arrogance blinds men. It makes them sloppy. It makes them leave traces they don't believe anyone will notice. He underestimated the power of memory, the persistence of love, and the endurance of a mother who refuses to forget. What is love, if not persistence? I loved Clara not only in life, but in death. I carried her with me through every sleepless night, every whispered prayer, every careful step I took to gather evidence. People talk about closure as if grief is a door you can lock and leave behind. But grief is not a door. Grief is a shadow. It walks with you. It reshapes you. It teaches you. And in my case, it gave me strength I never thought I had. I think of Clara's letter often. The way her handwriting curved on the page, hesitant in places, but steady where it mattered. She wrote of fear, but also of hope. She wanted to break free, to live without chains, to reclaim her dreams. She never got that chance. But by preserving her words, I gave her a second life. A life where her truth mattered. A life where she was not erased. And perhaps, in some way, that is the truest form of love a parent can give, to make sure their child is never silenced, even when they are gone. This journey has left me changed. I am not the same woman who smiled politely at dinner parties, who kept peace at all costs, who thought silence meant submission. My silence is different now. It is deliberate. It is chosen. It is a reminder that I can carry fire in my chest without letting it burn me from the inside. I do not need to scream to be heard. My actions speak. My patience speaks. My daughter speaks through me. There is a cost to revenge. People don't often talk about that. They glamorize the victory, the downfall of the villain, the satisfaction of seeing justice served. But the cost is heavy. Revenge eats away at time, at sleep, at the ability to simply exist without calculating the next move. There were nights I wanted to give in, to surrender, to let Daniel win, simply because the fight felt endless. But then I would remember Clara's smile, her joy, her trust in me. And I knew surrender was never an option. What have I learned? That greed is its own poison. That those who chase power at the expense of others eventually choke on it. That betrayal is a fire that consumes not just the betrayed, but the betrayer too. Daniel destroyed himself long before I stepped into that courtroom. All I did was hold up the mirror and let the world see what he had become. And what about me? I am not a hero. I am not a warrior. I am a mother. That is enough. Being a mother gave me the strength to face whispers, to carry secrets, to stand alone when no one believed me. Being a mother gave me the reason to fight with silence, to outlast, to endure. I may not have won back my daughter's life, but I won back her truth. And in that truth, she lives on. Tonight, as I sit in Clara's room, I trace my fingers along the spines of her books, the little notes she left in margins, the sketches tucked into journals. I feel her presence. I hear her laughter. And though my heart aches, I smile. Because love does not end with death. Love is persistence. Love is memory. Love is the refusal to let darkness erase light. I did not win because of hatred. Hatred would have destroyed me. I won because I chose patience. I won because I chose silence. I won because I remembered that the sharpest weapon is not rage, but clarity. Clara taught me that even in her absence. And now, when I look into the mirror, I see not just my reflection, but hers, standing beside me, reminding me every day, "You did not fail me, Mother. You gave me back my voice." So no, I did not win because of revenge. I won because of love. I never wanted to be the keeper of such a heavy story. But silence can either bury the truth or preserve it. Tonight, I choose preservation. That is why I sit here at my desk, candlelight flickering across the page, writing these words into the leather-bound journal Clara once gave me. "So you can write your dreams, Mom," she had said with a smile. She never imagined I would use it to write her truth. But perhaps this too is a dream, one of justice, one of remembrance, one of warning for those who come after me. To my family, to the children and grandchildren who may one day read this, you must know that life is not only about what you build, but what you protect. Wealth, power, and reputation can all be stolen, twisted, manipulated. But character, your integrity, your clarity of heart, no one can take that from you unless you give it away. Daniel tried to strip us of that by painting Clara's death as an accident, by silencing her voice, by assuming no one would care enough to question. He was wrong, and he will always be wrong, because truth, though buried, has a way of surfacing like roots breaking through stone. In the small wooden box I keep by my bedside, you will find 3 objects. Each one carries a part of this story. The first is Clara's photograph, taken on the day of her graduation, her smile radiant, her eyes full of unspent futures. She deserves to be remembered not as a victim, but as the bright soul she truly was. The second is her bracelet, silver with a single charm she insisted on wearing every day. I keep it, not because of its value, but because when I hold it, I remember the warmth of her hand in mine. The way she would squeeze gently when she wanted to say, "It's okay, Mom." And the third is the letter, the old letter that revealed everything, the one Daniel never thought I would find. This letter was her voice after death. It was the key that unlocked the lies and exposed the man who believed himself untouchable. If you take nothing else from this story, take this: always trust your instincts. The world will try to tell you that you are overreacting, that you are imagining things, that grief or fear clouds your vision. But a quiet voice inside you often sees what others cannot. Do not ignore it. It is not paranoia. It is survival. It is wisdom written into your blood by generations who came before you. I want you to also remember that revenge in its purest form is not fire. It is not screaming. It is not destruction. True revenge is patience. It is clarity. It is the ability to sit silently while the guilty unravel themselves, while their own greed becomes their noose. Rage burns quickly and consumes the one who carries it. Patience, however, endures. Patience builds a path toward justice that cannot be shaken. I learned this through pain, but I hope you will learn it through my words instead. One day, you may face betrayal. It may come from someone you love, someone you trusted, someone you believed would never hurt you. When that day comes, do not let it turn you into them. Do not let it steal your gentleness or corrupt your heart. Instead, let it teach you caution. Let it teach you strength. Let it remind you that love is not blind. It sees clearly, and it chooses anyway. But once someone weaponizes your love against you, you owe them nothing. You owe only yourself the truth. Sometimes, I sit in Clara's room, running my fingers along the spines of her books, touching the notes she left in the margins, the sketches she hid between pages. I imagine her laughing at my stubbornness, perhaps even scolding me for carrying this fight so far. But then I remember her eyes, the last time I saw her eyes, that held fear she never spoke aloud. I could not save her then, but I saved her now. And if there is one thing I want you to know, it is this: silence does not mean surrender. Sometimes silence is the loudest scream. Sometimes silence is the trap that makes the guilty confess without realizing it. I pass this story to you not to darken your hearts, but to prepare you. Because evil often hides behind charm, behind polished words, behind the illusion of love. And those who seek only to take will always underestimate those who wait. Remember that. Do not rush into noise and chaos. Learn to observe, to watch, to let arrogance betray itself. And above all, never forget Clara. She is more than a story. She is more than a warning. She is proof that truth has weight, and that even in death it can rise, it can speak, it can strike. Keep her picture, keep her bracelet, keep her letter, not as relics of tragedy, but as symbols of endurance, as proof that even when everything seems lost, one person's quiet determination can shift the balance between lies and truth. If you ever doubt, open this journal. Read these words again. Let them remind you of the power of patience, the strength of silence, and the unbreakable bond of love between a mother and her child. For love, even after loss, is the most dangerous weapon of all. It outlives betrayal. It outlives fear. It outlives death itself. And so I leave this torch in your hands. Carry it not as a burden, but as a light to guide you through darkness, a light to protect those you love, a light to burn away the illusions of the greedy. Carry it, and remember me not as the mother who lost, but as the mother who endured, who waited, who revealed the truth. That is my legacy. That is my gift. That is my warning. They call me the silent woman, the one who did not shout, the one who did not break dishes or curse the heavens. They whispered that my silence meant weakness, that grief had left me hollow, that I had surrendered. But now they know. My silence was not surrender. It was the weapon, and my smile. My smile was the final verdict delivered to the man who thought he had destroyed us. I stood in the courtroom when the truth was laid bare. I did not cheer when the sentence was read. I did not cry when Daniel's mask finally slipped and his voice cracked under the weight of his lies. I simply smiled, because in that moment, my daughter's voice had spoken through me, and justice, true, patient justice, had prevailed. They will remember Daniel's downfall. They will gossip about the scandal, the betrayal, the arrogance that led him here. But what I want remembered is not his ruin. It is Clara's truth. The letter she left behind, the courage she showed even in her fear, the way her words rose from silence to strip the mask from a man who thought himself untouchable. That is what matters. That is what will live on. I cannot bring Clara back. No verdict, no punishment, no revenge will ever return her to me. But I can carry her forward. I can carry her light, her memory, her truth. And in that way, she is not gone. She is alive in every word I speak, in every lesson I pass on, in every person who hears this story and remembers her name. So I ask you now, what would you do if you stood where I stood? If betrayal stared you in the face? If grief threatened to silence you? If the world told you to move on and forget? Would you scream? Would you fight? Or would you wait in silence, sharpening your patience until the guilty condemn themselves? This is not only my story. It could be anyone's. Betrayal is universal. Greed is everywhere. But so is love. So is truth. And so is the quiet strength to endure. If this story has touched you, if it has made you think of the price of love, of the weight of betrayal, of the endurance of truth, then share your thoughts. Tell me, if it were you, what choice would you make? And remember, this is just one voice among many, one story among countless others. If you wish to hear more tales of betrayal, of revenge, of justice, delivered in unexpected ways, then follow Family Stories collection. Because silence may be quiet, but the stories it hides are louder than thunder. This is not the end. This is the beginning of many truths yet to be told.